With everything that has happened in the world during the global pandemic of coronavirus, the need for healing trauma is more important now than ever. Have you ever wondered, have I been through trauma? I'm going to share with you ways that you can know for sure in this video. My name is Tiffany Toombs. I'm a high-performance mindset coach that has worked with thousands of people across the world to heal their trauma and emotional baggage so they can truly step into success, happiness, and fulfillment. Trauma is one of the most misunderstood concepts and words in the modern era. In this video, I'm going to share with you what trauma truly is. I'm going to share examples that most people often miss of what trauma can be, and I'm going to share with you how you can start healing it today. So what is trauma? The definition of trauma has been changing over the last couple years as we start to understand the long-term impacts of adverse experiences that we experience throughout our life. It used to be thought that trauma was a singular event that contained some sort of horrific abuse or some sort of horrific accident that caused this long-lasting impact. We know now that trauma is so much more than that. While trauma can be those experiences of horrific abuse or accidents, it is also so much more. So trauma is actually not really the event itself. Trauma is a person's perception of the event that they experienced in the moment that they experienced it. So this is how two people can experience the exact same parents, or they can have the exact same upbringing, and one person has long-term effects from that trauma and the other person doesn't. It's based on the perception that the person had when the event was happening. Now, the other key piece of that definition to notice is the age they were when the event first happened. It's easy to look back on experiences that we had as a child and justify it in some way, make an excuse. My parents were doing the best that they could. We'll talk about that in a moment. Or, oh, that wasn't that bad. Somebody else had it worse. And this is oftentimes what stops people from healing their trauma, is that they are judging what they experienced from a place where they have more knowledge, more resources, and more emotional intelligence. So if you experienced something as a child, it was the child's perception of that event that led to the trauma happening, that reprogrammed the nervous system and the brain to have long-lasting impacts, as opposed to looking back at it from an adult mindset and being able to justify it or make excuses for it. Before I share with you some examples of what trauma is, I want to remind you to subscribe to my channel. I am putting out brand new content every single week to help you heal trauma and emotional baggage so that you can step into the best version of yourself. So go ahead and click that subscribe button and like this video while you're there. So as I said before, trauma can be instances of abuse: physical, mental, financial, sexual. All of those are examples of trauma. But trauma is so much more than that. In fact, trauma happens anytime we perceive that our core human needs are not being met. Now, especially in childhood, there are two major core human needs that we need met. Those are safety or security, and love, connection, or acceptance. And I would even argue that the love, the attachment, the connection leads to safety. So that is the most important need that we need met while we are growing up. So what are some other examples of trauma that most people brush off or justify? If you had a parent who worked a lot, consciously you know that they needed to work a lot in order for you to have all the things and experiences that you had. But at an unconscious level, your needs were not being met, and that can be perceived as trauma. Having a parent who was emotionally unavailable. Maybe they didn't know how to deal with their own emotions. Maybe they were too caught up in a breakup, a divorce, a separation, grieving the loss of one of their parents, that they could not be there for you emotionally. Maybe you had a parent who had a physical disability or a mental health condition that stopped them from being able to fully show up for you. If you had a childhood where there was a lot of chaos or instability, this could mean moving around a lot or listening to your parents fight. Maybe they didn't directly yell at you or they didn't directly abuse you, but if you heard them criticizing each other or fighting a lot, that can create instability and a feeling of lacking safety in the child's mind as well. Having a parent who was a perfectionist, who needed to project that perfect family image to the world. Having a parent who was highly critical of everything that you did, or who was always looking for you to be better. These are all examples of times when it's possible that we perceived our needs were not being met. Now, these are just a couple examples of what could cause trauma in the childhood mind or even the teenage or young adult mind. There are so many different examples, but I wanted to share with you a couple examples so that you could start to see in your life where maybe you're holding on to some trauma or emotional baggage that is no longer serving you. Now, before I share with you how you can start the healing process, I want to hear from you. Now that you've heard this brand new definition of trauma and some lesser known examples of trauma, how has that changed your perception of trauma and possibly of your own life? Go to the comments below and let me know. So how do you start the healing process? First, we actually have to acknowledge that there is trauma there. This is one of the biggest blocks for people getting started on their healing journey, and it definitely was for me. For 28 years, I denied that I had been through any sort of trauma. I justified it as family doing the best that they could, or other people having it worse, or it didn't happen all the time. It only happened up until the age of 10. I want you to know that it doesn't have to be an either-or world. It can be that your parents did the best that they could with what they knew and with the resources they had, and that your needs were not met. It can be both, that your parents were great people and you still experienced some form of trauma. Now, not all trauma has to come from parents. It can come from playground bullies, it can come from siblings, from grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, teachers. It can come from anybody in your life. It doesn't always mean that that person was a terrible person. It doesn't always mean that they intentionally set out to hurt you. It just means that they were having a human experience and you were having a human experience that caused an adverse experience for you or caused trauma for you in the mind, and it recalibrated your nervous system. So it starts with acknowledging that we've had some form of trauma. We then need to be able to identify the false identities, the limiting beliefs, and the personality traits that we've developed as a result of this perceived trauma. If we're in a household where we have a perfectionist parent or a highly critical parent, then we might develop or adopt an identity of being a perfectionist in order to seek out love from that person. You might become an overachiever in order to feel like you can gain acceptance from that parent, that teacher, or that coach. If you had a parent who was emotionally unavailable, you may have felt or adopted a personality that you needed to take care of everybody else. So maybe you became a people pleaser, you lack the ability to set boundaries because you adopted a belief that it was your job to look after other people. As we start to dig into trauma, we can see that there's a lot of limiting beliefs and false identities and personality traits that we create. We betray ourselves in order to get those needs met, and then oftentimes we just continue to repeat those behaviors or those identities or those personality traits until we believe that that's just fundamentally who we are. I want you to know that you were not put here to be a perfectionist. You were not put here to be a doormat for other people. Rather, that's just how you have adapted to the experiences that you've faced. And we can change those identities anytime that you're ready to let go of that emotional baggage. And then finally, we have to choose a modality or a technique that we are going to use to start to offload and heal this emotional baggage. That can be anything from talk therapy to EMDR. It could be hypnosis. There are so many ways that you can start to do the work and heal yourself. The most important thing is to find somebody that you feel like you can trust, somebody that you feel is able to support you and hold space for you without shaming you or blaming you for what you're experiencing, what comes up, or what you have been through. Now, if you're still a little bit unsure about whether or not you have experienced trauma, you can go to mytraumascore.com or click on the link in the description. It will take you to a test I've created, a simple questionnaire I'll ask you some questions, and I'll let you know the likelihood of whether or not you've experienced trauma, and I'll suggest some activities that you can do to get started on your healing journey. So to get free access to this questionnaire, just go to mytraumascore.com or click on the link in the description below. Thanks for watching.